In this video, we're going to learn how to use VLOOKUP. The VLOOKUP function is probably the most useful of functions when working with evaluation data. It assumes you have multiple spreadsheets of data with a lot of the same names or IDs and want to consolidate the data from each spreadsheet into one cohesive document. For example, you might have a list of students taking multiple tests throughout the school year, and you receive different spreadsheets of data for each testing period. You want to develop a master list of students and have each of their test scores all situated together into one spreadsheet. Enter VLOOKUP. Now, before we begin, there's a few things that you need to check in your data to make sure that we can execute the function with no error. First, you need there to be a matching field in both data sets for Excel to reference. A unique ID works best in this situation. I'll go over in a future video how you can create your own unique ID if you don't have one. Second, on the reference sheet, the one that you'll be pulling the data from, the unique ID needs to live in the first column, column A. Third, always pull data over from a different document. If you try to pull data from the same document, but a different sheet within the document, there can be errors. Sometimes this works, sometimes it doesn't. In my case, I just default to putting it in a separate document. Fourth, if you're pulling over numeric data, you need to make sure that it doesn't have errors. Errors can be seen as little green triangles in the top corner of the cells. This means that numeric data is formatted as text, and if you don't fix it, it won't pull over correctly. To fix it and remove those little green triangles, you need to highlight the data, click on the error message, and then select Convert to Number. And just a couple of reminders. One, if there are multiple instances of your unique ID in your reference workbook, it's only going to pull over the first instance of that ID. And second, try not to reference data that is actually a formula that's being pulled from elsewhere. This might seem like a lot, but don't worry, after a few times of doing this, you'll be looking for these things and it'll become second nature. Okay, let's get started and see the formula in action. Okay, so this right here is the page that we're going to bring the data into. And we want to use these IDs as our reference IDs. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the cell, click on the first cell, and I'm going to get an equal sign and type VLOOKUP, open my parentheses. Now it's asking me for the VLOOKUP value. So that's the value right there that I want to look up, and then give it a comma. And then over here, I'm going to just click on the entire table. You can do that by clicking on the top left corner of the spreadsheet. It's going to reference the IDs because they're in the first column. And then I'm going to come back over here, give it a comma, and then I'm going to tell it what column that I'm wanting to bring data over from. So I'm not going to say column D, you have to give the number of the column. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4. So I want to bring the RIT comparison 1 data over. So it's number 4. So I'm just going to type 4, comma, and then false. And you type false because you want an exact match. And that's how you do that. Close your parentheses, press enter, and there's my number. And then all I would have to do is just double click on this and it will copy everything all the way down. And I want to make sure that it did, and it did. Great. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy and paste this because when you click in here, you see it's still a formula, but I want this just to be numbers. So I want to get rid of the formula. So I'm basically going to copy and paste. You copy all of that, click outside of it, and then go back and then paste the number or the values. Okay. So paste values. And now when I click on the cell, you can see that it's just the values. So now I want to get rid of all of these NAs here, which mean that it couldn't find any data. So I'm going to click on my filter and I'm going to select NA And then I'm just going to highlight everything, right click, clear contents, and then I'm going to bring it all back. Okay, great. Now let's do this column. So equal VLOOKUP, open parentheses, tell it what you're going to look up, give it a comma, come over to the page where you want to bring in your data, select the whole thing, and this time it's in column 5. So I'm going to say comma 5, comma false, oops, open parentheses, return. Okay, great. I'm going to do that same process over again. Copy, click out, paste value, deselect, select all my NAs, click on the top, select them all, clear contents, and then there we go. So now what we have is a complete data set. Anybody who had data in this year, it's been brought over, and then all of their scores from this year have been brought in as well. So now you have a master data sheet, and you can use this kind of technique to bring in any other data that you want up along here. So sometimes you might want to bring all of your data in all at the same time instead of doing 2 separate formulas in each of these. So if ever I have adjacent data, like I do here in my comparison 1 and comparison 2, and I want to bring them over at the same time, I can write a formula that does that. So the first thing I'm going to do is, instead of starting just in one cell, I'm going to highlight both cells that I want to bring it into and start my formula up here. So do VLOOKUP, open parentheses, comma, select this whole table, and now, comma, I'm going to open up with a bracket, and I'm going to say the number of both columns that I want to bring in. So I want to bring in column 4, comma, and column 5. Close my bracket, comma, false, close parentheses. Now, what I'm going to do now is, which is different from before, is I'm going to do a Control-Shift-Return, which is a array function. You don't really need to know what that is, just know that that's what you're doing in this situation. So Control-Shift-Return, and both of my numbers come in. Now, when you do a Control-Shift-Return, you can see it puts brackets around the whole entire formula. So now I can come in here and I can double click in that little bar and everything comes down, and voila, I've brought everything in at the same time.